Thank you very much, David. The chance now to ask some questions, as we did this morning, so if I can ask Sherry and Gareth to come back on stage. I actually quite like Gareth's idea of having the My Heartbeat, but I would change it slightly. If you involved actuaries, you would be able to look at family genetics and things like that and figure out roughly how long you were going to live. You would know how long you'd been living already. You would then do it as a countdown clock. And personally, I would wear one of those. I think it fits in with the whole Scottish pessimism thing. You know, anytime you were feeling too cheerful, you go, oh, bloody hell, you know. Right. Anyway, any questions for our three speakers so far? If you could wait till the microphone actually comes towards you. Can we bring the lights up slightly in the auditorium, please? That's easier, better now. Thank you. Question at the front here, sir.
Yeah, three great talks there. I was wondering, one of the interesting things that came out from the referendum was that 30,000 of our graduates leave every year. And I'm just wondering what you think Scottish businesses should be doing to try and hang on to that talent.
Okay, who wants to take that question first? Nobody wants to take that question first. It was a very good question. Sorry, can I ask you to identify yourself too?
Sorry, Tom McEwen from the BCS Academy in Edinburgh, Napier.
Thank you, Tom. Right,
so
David
first. I think it's sort of quite simple. There's got to be interesting jobs. The top people get to choose where they want to work and what they work on. And I think we're both trying to make our contribution to that. But I'd also say the flow of people is good. You know, there's some great Polish, French, Spanish engineers working with us, and I don't know whether that's a net figure or just is offsetted or not. So, but I think it does come down to, you know, if you're working in technology, are you working in an IT department, or are you actually working on what the core of the product is?
David?
Well, I think that's the case. I mean, I think it is you know, to use Sherry's market analogies, you know, it is a market, and it's supply and demand. And you know, if there's, you know, we'll cast our minds back to when we started. If there was some, you know, if there's an interesting opportunity, you know, you're going to go to that interesting opportunity. I think it's ideal if that interesting opportunity is in Scotland, but if it's not in Scotland, you know, it's somewhere else. So I think the root of it gets back to, you know, the kind of ecosystem and the fabric of, you know, early stage startup interesting companies that we've got within Scotland. If those are there, you know, I think people will want to stay. I probably think it's as simple as that.
Sherry, is there anything inherently wrong with the idea of wanting to hang on to your own young people? You know, but that, well, these two gentlemen have talked about a market. You know, it's a flowing market. You know, obviously we've got people coming in from overseas. We've got, you know, our people going off elsewhere, etc. You know, that's been the sort of paradigm at the moment. Should we be trying to hang on to more of our own young people, or is that the wrong way of looking at it?
I think I don't know if that's the right way of thinking about it. I think that one of the things that we can do is raise the awareness of everybody that there are really fabulous, fast-growing companies around here, and they're everywhere. And earlier today, they were putting up pictures of people, you know, Bill Gates and you know, Zuckerberg and Jobs, and they're all very nice people, but actually they should have been in your picture and, you know, in your picture, because the companies that are really quite interesting are all around us. So I think there's an obligation for us to celebrate the successes that we have rather than being shy about it. And I think that's important. I actually think the velocity and the momentum in an ecosystem is really healthy. So having them leave, go somewhere else and come back. There's this wonderful lady called Annalise Saxenian who wrote about, again, the velocity of people in and out of ecosystems. So if they go away for a little while, they can come down, you know, go to Cambridge, they can go to Boston, they can go to Silicon Valley. That's all healthy, because they're probably going to end up here. And they can start up and they can spread those lessons that they have learned elsewhere. And there's a lot of people that also come in. I don't know the net figures, so I have absolutely no idea, but come in and they can work for the fast-growing companies. And if people here aren't willing to work for those companies and they need them, they'll get them, because they're really interesting jobs and they change the world. And I mean, I give my IT, if I were a kid, to work at your company. That light is amazing. I think the combination of bioinformatics, you know, information onto genomics is, I said earlier, about 3 or 4 months ago, came out and said, I think that will be the source of the first $1 trillion company in this country. And it will be absolutely in your field. And if we've got a better chance here to solve that problem, what a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for any kid coming out of school. But if they don't know about your company, then we need to fix that. So I think it's a promotional sort of issue more than anything else. But we should welcome people from all sorts of places.
I'm not saying you shouldn't, but to use your own terminology, and perhaps I phrased it wrongly, if the velocity of an ecosystem is too high, does that endanger the future of projects that are going to take longer term? If you can't hang on to your people, you're constantly having to refresh people that have disappeared off somewhere else.
If you can't get them and you can't accept customer orders, that's an enormous problem. The crisis that we have right now in skills is that the kids are coming out of school and they don't have the correct skill sets, so that they're not able to fill the positions that need to be filled in these companies. And that's a real problem and will damage the economic growth of this country. But there are open jobs and they are interesting. They just need to somehow get filled, ideally by people who are here.
Yeah.
People having more choice about what they do in their working life cannot be anything but a good thing. And I think part of...
Really, as an employer, you say that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wouldn't you like people who are a bit more drone-like and stayed where they were put?
No way.
No?
It's actually quite hard to work at a company that's growing really fast, so you need people who are switched on and who welcome that amount of change and sometimes chaos. And people who want to be drones aren't going to help you make those innovative products that you need to make, or create those business models that need to be created in this fast-moving world.
I mean, perhaps gets a bit esoteric, but there's this balance between capital and labor, and the more skilled we get and the more choices we have over the deployment of our skill, the greater the reward and the goes to labor. And as an entrepreneur, you sit between the two things, and nothing wrong with capital whatsoever, but the more power to, in a constructive way, to the choice you make over how you spend your working week, the better.
There's the book that was just written and released by Reid Hoffman, the latest book, is called The Alliance. And it flips the business model of employment. And if you haven't read it, read it. It will change the way you view things. And it changes it to working doesn't mean you've got a drone working for you. You have entered into an alliance with them to achieve a goal that's worth achieving. And I think that's a very interesting way of thinking about our world. And if the kids that are graduating today will have 14 different jobs or pieces of a journey before they end up, somewhere else, that's interesting. And it changes the way that you approach relationships. And it doesn't mean you're employing drones. It means that you're entering into an alliance with another human being who's going to help you go somewhere because it's in their interests. And that will be a great step for them in the next 5 to 10 years. I mean, he talks about, in your conversation when you're interviewing them, you need to understand where they want to be in 10 years' time and how the little journey that they're choosing to spend with you is going to contribute to that. Different way of thinking, but I think it's an important way of thinking.
Okay. Question there. We just pop it to that gentleman. Next row. Pass it along. Pass the parcel. Okay. Again, if you could identify yourself, sir.
Hi, it's Ewan Robertson from Aquila Insight, which is a fabulous, fast-growing company. I'd just like to ask the panel, I started a business in the early 90s, and I'm starting another business right now. And one of the things I'm really taken by is the total difference in the startup costs, investing in things like tech and the like. I'd wonder what the views of the panel are.
Could you just clarify that before you put the microphone away? Have the costs gone massively up or massively down?
Well, we used facilities from Amazon Web Services, which might have cost us £100,000 in the middle of the 90s. I think we spent 50 quid.
Good point, David.
Yeah, so I think that's right. I mean, I think we all know those graphs, we all know those curves, and we all know the direction of travel and all that. So, so yes, that sort of, start up on the, on the tech infrastructure, the development environment, the release environment, all the modern kind of methodologies, all that. Yes, unfortunately, the cost curve on that is phenomenal for removing barriers to entry to get going. So I think that's true. I think, you know, from my perspective right now within our marketplace, there's an advantage there, but actually there's a whole bunch of other stuff that needs to get done that create, I wouldn't call them, they are barriers to some extent, but I think they're necessary barriers, and that is really to do with, you know, if you sort of clinically interpret something that's come off a sequencing environment and combine it with other clinical data for a patient, and then come up with an algorithm for that eventually gets used in as part of a clinical decision process. There's a whole, what in essence is sort of software as a regulated device process that has to get built. So, you know, there's some, from my point of view, our tech barriers, you know, have been massively reduced, but the challenges that still need to get solved in terms of solving that problem, you know, there are other challenges there that have other costs that are not going to get reduced in any way, shape or form. And so this is, to my point of view, and I know this is different than a kind of consumer model, but this is back to this consideration of the business model, you know, the end-to-end business model to actually get that product delivered into market. Tech bit, I agree, tick, 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 huge drop in costs, massive increase in performance. But in our business model, there's a whole bunch of other challenges that have to get resolved that would do cost money, right? And have to be gone through. But the tech piece, absolutely.
I think startups are in this strange bit within a spectrum where at one end of the spectrum is the image of the weaving loom factories and the old model of what an entrepreneur meant. And at the other, you've got, say, Andy Murray, who plays a game. But he really cares about that game and puts his all into it. And it's a worthwhile endeavor because it produces things of beauty and value to other people. And what Amazon Web Services does is it moves ideas being about mass investment, utilization of people as resource into closer, not at, but closer to playing a very important game.
Okay.
As an entrepreneur who's been doing it a long time, I think it's fabulous. I love the idea that it takes so little now to get the idea off the ground and start testing it with massive audiences. It's brilliant. It is, you still need to get beyond the launch phase and down the path, but it makes the ability to try things out far easier, and I think the ability to produce stunning products and get to that product market fit, far, far easier. The amount that you would have had to spend to get there has dropped down tremendously, which means that for entrepreneurs who have ideas, they can get them off the ground with far, far less risk, which can only be good for customers, be they B2B customers or B2C customers.
Yeah, the reason I asked the supplementary is a friend of mine's a television producer, and he said to me, it must be about 5 or 6 years ago now, that back then he could buy cameras, sound recording equipment, digital editing equipment, everything he needed essentially to make a television program cheaper for an international shoot than he used to pay for baggage costs for the equipment he had before. And I think it's just a feature of the digital age. There was a gentleman there somewhere. There we go. Keep on coming down, if you wouldn't mind. Walk this way. Right. I'm not going to describe anybody.
Thank you. So I'm actually a Canadian as well. Go Canada. And it's funny how, as I look at the Scottish entrepreneurial scene, it is very similar to that of Canada in that we're a country up top, lots of smart people who end up getting sucked down south.
Or over
actually,
here.
Sorry?
Or over here.
Or over here, yeah, that's true, we're here. But strangely, random statistic is something like 300,000 Canadians live in Silicon Valley, which if you actually put it on as a percentage of our population, that's almost 1% of our population lives in Silicon Valley or in that area. And I guess the nice thing about that is you get a lot of smart people from Canada who go down to Silicon Valley and end up coming back with all that experience. What you guys were saying earlier about if you've got somebody who's been with a company that's gone from 10 employees to 1,000 employees versus that 25 to 50, there is a significant difference. And unfortunately, they're a lot less common. So the question I guess I'm wondering for you guys is, how can we convince people who have that experience, who have gone off to Silicon Valley, who've gone off to New York, London, Berlin, wherever they've gone and actually been part of those companies, to come back here and start their own organizations or take part in that entrepreneurial process?
Got to be you for a start. It has to.
Well, I like marketplaces. I see the solution to the question you're posing in a marketplace. So you can be a part of an ecosystem without living in it. So C100 is an investment club by serial entrepreneurs, and they invest in Canadian companies, regardless of where those companies happen to be domiciled and regardless of where the angel, who happens to be of Canadian, sort of citizenship, happens to be domiciled. So that's one thing. I think that was a really smart thing that Canada did, and that all of us can do. I think another thing is that we can use the modern technology and the Skype services or whatever they are to connect my angel investor who got my second company off the ground, who had himself started 70 or been involved in starting 70 companies. Never once over the 9 years the company came to Britain for a board meeting, but he was available to me every single day if I needed him, and he'd make a point of making himself available to me. So I got him as a resource whenever I wanted, however I wanted. I learned really quickly how to use him efficiently, but he was there. So I think the physical proximity that I think you're alluding to isn't that important any longer, and I think we can use the services to make that knowledge spread a lot further than it might otherwise spread. There's also, I sort of recently formed a few years ago something called the Harvard Business School Angels, and that's a group of angels from around the world that will fund anything that has any HBS person associated with it, not an alumni, but if there's somebody on the board or an investor, they will listen to those. And again, that's spreading, fairly scarce resources quite far, but with a connection. I was speaking to a woman last night and talking about the number of Scottish people that are living in America. Well, any Scottish company that's doing something pretty phenomenal here and thinks that there might be some market for them in America, you should definitely be reaching out to those people as angels or as mentors or as advisors or just as a one-off, I think I see on LinkedIn you know that person, and that person I want to partner with. Can you introduce me? That's available to all of us, and the tools that allow you to see that you've got those connections exist all around us. And that didn't exist 5 or 10 years ago, but now the data has made that possible. So we can go a lot further with the same resources than we have been before.
David?
Well, I think it's kind of good question. I mean, I think on the sort of physical side of things, Sherry's right. But on the physical side of things, within Scotland, we've got, the Saltire Foundation, which is now kind of joined with Entrepreneurial Exchange to be Entrepreneurial Scotland, and and the whole, Saltire Foundation, which I think has done, a fantastic job in basically recognising, some of the problems that exist. We know that we've got great tech, great science in Scotland. We know we're strong in that, but we know that we're weak on product, marketing, sales, business development, some general management, those types of things. Saltire Foundation was about pulling in, about 100 really bright, sort of graduate, postgraduate, some experienced people, and really putting them through this program over in, with Babson in the US, lots of visits to, to companies in Silicon Valley, a lot of stuff out in China. And it really has, in many respects, just opened people's eyes to other things and other people and other experiences. And some of our people have gone into those programs, which I think is a good thing. I'd like them to come back. They may not. But we've also brought some people who have graduated from those programs into the company as well. And, you know, it's a swings and roundabouts, but I think those sorts of initiatives are really good. And we've got those working in Scotland right now, and they work very, very effectively. We've kind of got an international Scots network, again, of Scottish people running big companies all over the world. We know who they are, we can get connected to them, we can get introductions. We've got a lot of those physical capabilities already, and we've had them for a while, and they do have genuine depth to them. And I think in order to keep them going, it's the responsibility of all of us, you know, to either participate or to use them or to thank people for setting those up and spending a lot of time doing it, because they are really, really valuable. And this is what I think we are good at this when we've spent a lot of time setting a lot of those things up. I think if we take that and then we add on, in essence, all the, you know, the kind of B2C social media technology that exists there that just makes it easier to get people connected, you know, we can do some great things.
Gareth, do you want to add to that?
I mean, there's quite a number of people who graduated from Informatics or other Scottish universities, and right now are working from home for Silicon Valley companies. And so really we don't need to look for changes in the environment. We just need to look at our own businesses and say what makes it attractive for them to work for us instead. And that comes down to difficult enough problem, better or a competitive reward in terms of terms, and the chance to have an impact in what you do. And we can then measure success on that basis.
Okay. Question down the front here. Polly? All right. Sherry I thought she had the quarter past. All right.
Okay, I thought I was going to stay till 15:15.
I'll
I'll stay for 5 more minutes, and then I will run off very quickly. Sorry.
Okay, right, fair enough.
One last question, then I zip.
Okay, lady there. Okay, so, well, can we get a microphone to the lady there, please? I'll try coming back to you, sir. Okay. One person, one microphone. That's the rule.
Hi. Thanks very much for your talks. They're really interesting. I head up HR for a software company in Glasgow called Simulate. So we do process improvement software, and we do have a war on for talent. And you can see that by the Skyscanner stand downstairs that I see at all the different graduate recruitment fairs. But I think that you have to have a unique company culture as one of your sort of kind of selling points as a kind of smaller organisation, and it's something that we sort of concentrate on. But what I would like to know is when you're scaling up, and we're talking about the kind of global aspect of your product, but when you start to have people on the ground in different offices across the globe, what sort of considerations do you have to make in terms of company culture, and how do you sort of retain that when you go from 100 employees up to 500, 1,000 employees?
Do you see the Skyscanner stand as being something of a weapon of mass employment?
I love it. Absolutely love it, yeah.
Good. Okay, right, fair enough. Right, Gareth?
So I think culture is one of the hardest things, and particularly in tech companies, because, you know, my first instinct is I don't want to talk about culture. It's about people, and, you know, it should be epiphenomenal. But I had good advice over the years to actually think about it hard, and I think it's got to be truthful, and you will never get it right because maths and music can be perfect, nothing else. And on the employment side, I think the thing is, you know, the financial services industry has become established, and it's got momentum. And we need to make sure that happens in the software and internet economy sector. And I think we've got a good chance of that. But we're not necessarily completely there. And I suppose, you know, in terms of Skyscanner impact, lots of people have gone on to start businesses after spending time at Skyscanner. And I think that's different to a bank recruiting into an IT department, or a bank recruiting people down to London, etc. So I commiserate. I don't fully explicate myself.
I think it's a total war for talent, and that's really important. But I also think that our weapon as scale-ups is that the connection between what we do every day and the impact that we have in the world is far, far clearer than in many, many environments. And you might likely be taking somebody in an environment where they can't clearly see the impact that they're having. And I think that there's a really basic human need to understand the impact that we're having on the world, and that's our weapon as scale-up. So celebrating the successes and knowing that you won't get to where you need to go and where you want to go unless you recruit the people that want that as well. So I think in the war for talent, making sure that you hire someone that doesn't just want a job, but they want to fulfill that mission that your company has as its opportunity.
And I think the way you
it.
phrased that question, was very much coming from that direction. Is the sense I got.
Okay.
To be clear.
David, if you don't mind, I'm going to try and drop in one more question. I mean, you more or less jumped out of your seat. There's the microphone for you, sir.
Thank you. My name is Paul Arnold. I'm CEO of a startup company called Fast Courts. That's an SME, Sherry, with an emphasis on the S. My observations are from your graph, David, the entrepreneurial journey. I've seen a few variations of the graph, but there's I suppose, a common denominator with the Valley of Death. However, my question to you, David, for sake of saving some time, is, in your experience, what would be the average time from the startup to the optimistic next step? And secondly, is there a trend of that time being perhaps shorter or longer?
That's a really difficult question.
It's a bit like how long should it take between first and second base?
There's a lot of depends there. Yeah, yeah. Don't want to go there either. So there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of depends there. I just think that there are things that you can do to get from one side of that to the other, as quickly as possible and as efficiently as possible, and not having a whole bunch of burnt out people on the right hand side of the graph as possible. I think there are things that you can do to do that. Well, I think, I mean, I connect back to the sort of things that I put up, and I'm not saying this is relevant for everyone, but it's certainly relevant for my experience. The business model piece is really important. I've had experiences of thinking we have a great product, it goes in there, but actually it doesn't connect with how people want to buy it. And so I thought I'd launched, but I haven't launched. Now I've got to go back to the shop, do some other things, and then relaunch. So that's taken another 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, of burn. Now, if I'd been a bit smarter and thought a bit harder at the front end of that, then maybe we could have avoided that. It might have taken a bit longer to get that first release out, but maybe an extra month is worth it versus paying for an extra 9 months. So I just think that throughout that journey, my experience is there are so many ways to kind of make it a little bit better. You're not going to make it go away. It depends on the nature of the business that you're in, but you're not going to be able to shrink something down, to something that's really, really fast, certainly within a kind of B2B market in particular. But I think there are things. I think your business model is one. I think the team that is there is really important. Basically, a large number of things that can be done to sort of try and shorten the cycle from one side to the next.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there. Stop. Just before she disappears out the building, can we thank Sherry? Thank you very much, Sherry. Yeah. And I can see you've got additional questions there, but I would suggest you get David in the break. We're just going to break for refreshments. Can I also ask you to thank our other two speakers, Gareth and David. Thank you very much. Very interesting.